The Bible reading is from Habakkuk, chapter 2, first 3 verses of that chapter, and then verses 12 to 14. Habakkuk says, "I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me, and what answer I am to give to this complaint." Then the Lord replied, "Write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets, so that a herald may run with it. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay." Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and establishes a town by crime. Has not the Lord Almighty determined that the people's labor is only fuel for the fire, that the nations exhaust themselves for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Habakkuk, interesting guy. I've been talking about him through the week, and he's very interesting because all the other prophets speak to us, the people. Habakkuk spends his time talking to God. And today we're going to get a little bit more of that. But in the past couple of days that I've spoken about Habakkuk, he's shouted at God, "How long, O Lord?" And I suspect most of us have a little bit of "How long, O Lord?" about something. And then he goes on to say, "Why do you tolerate such evil, such bullies, such power grabbers in the world?" And that feels really present just today. So I wonder what your questions are along those lines that you've sort of been uttering in here, but have never quite had the faith to tell God about, because it doesn't feel right. What are they? Just think for a moment. It's right to tell God about these deep and impossible concerns. And there's enough of them, isn't there, in our world at the moment. It's right to tell him and sort of let rip both barrels right between his almighty eyes. But here's the question. How are you going to find God's answer to those questions? It's right that they're expressed, but is it just going to end up as a series of complaints and no more? Oft repeated complaints sometimes. What we see in Habakkuk is a deep desire to know the mind and heart of God. So this verse is very special alongside what we've just read. This comes from the Psalms. And here the psalmist writes, "When I tried to understand all this, it was oppressive to me." That too sounds familiar, doesn't it? The world's in a mess at the moment of the most profound and frightening sort. And it can oppress our living. When I tried to understand all this, it was oppressive to me till I entered the sanctuary of God. Then I understood their final destiny. Again, it's about the long view, which we find so uncomfortable. It's about the greatness and bigness of God, and that he's still in control, he's still in charge, whatever it looks like. Hence, Habakkuk takes action. He doesn't just stay with the woes and the oppression of the day. He says, I will stand at my watch and station myself on the rampart. I will look to see what he will say to me and what answer I am to give to this complaint. I love that picture of a watchtower. Years ago, when I read Habakkuk on a quiet couple of days, I actually did a little watercolour imagining this watchtower looking out over the desert, and the desert going away into the distance and getting ever more vague. And I wrote alongside it this verse. The watchtower, you see, is a set-apart place. You go there on your own and you don't want or need, in fact it's detrimental to the whole process, anybody else around. You're there seriously to watch. Other people's lives are at stake if you don't keep watch on the battlements, on the watchtower. A set-apart place with a clear view where there's no distractions. So, a question for you. Where is your watchtower? And if the answer is, I'm not sure, maybe it's time to find a place to step aside where you won't be interrupted, and you watch with God and for God. I think we all need one. And that sense of stepping aside, a watchman would not be there for 5 minutes and then off. A watchman would be there for a considerable period of time and would be on duty regularly to keep watch for what on earth is going on. A watchman is involved in intense looking, not just something, it's a pretty view out there. There's an intensity about the looking and also a degree of training. This is not easy stuff. To sit with God and watch is not easy and natural. It takes practice and more practice. Many years ago, I used to be a fencer. Not putting up fences, but poking people with bits of metal. And that didn't come easily. I was actually training 5 days a week. It was an intense training to get better and for it to become natural. And we need to take seriously the whole idea of watching and waiting for God. And it won't come naturally. Sitting quietly with God and not telling God to hurry up and appear is hard work. It's worth the effort. And I think all of us at some level are called to be watchmen and women for God. And if you're serious about knowing some of the answers to those big questions, that's where you turn your eyes. I had a a day off yesterday, and it was great fun. Really good glass of cider at lunchtime. But then I walked up the hill onto West Hill in Hastings and found a bench, and I looked out. And that, for probably 15, 20 minutes, was my watchtower. And the thing I think God showed me is it's so easy when you sit at your place of watching to nonetheless let your eyes focus on all the mess and the problems. And as I sat there and looked out, I imagined all the warring that's going on at the moment. And it was as if God said to me, move your eyes onto my face. Watch that, listen to my voice, not to all the mess that's all around. Let's move back to the Bible passage. Because God does answer. God does answer Habakkuk, not in ways that are immediate, not in the ways that are nice and neat, but he answers. And God says, for the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. So we have a picture of this almighty God, who we have a tendency to diminish into the moment and the present. A picture of the almighty God who's saying, I've still got my hand on this. I'm still in control. Keep your eyes on me. You see, it's speaking about God's long-term plan will really happen, and it will be very good. And it really challenges our obsession with this present moment, about seeing God's activity in this present moment. And that's been my whole ministry, I admit. Longing to see God in this present moment and being, I'm not sure what the word is, but dissatisfied with listening to so much of what Christians are saying about that seems to be pie in the sky when we die. So we are going to be praying for people's healing at the end of this service. And that is part of good news. And Jesus said it was part of good news and demonstrated it was part of kingdom come as he touched and healed and released people. But what I'm saying today is alongside that absolute certainty of God's kingdom coming today, in this moment, there is this other long-term plan that will happen, that sort of makes sense of the chaos of our world in any generation, but it seems to be very much at the moment. And the long-term plan, this is what God will do, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of God, just as the waters cover the sea.